Okay. Last time we were here, we talked about emotions, that they were a gift of God. I know some of us, it's a gift we don't want. Yet, one of the things I have to watch that. It's coming over the tape, this quick. One of the things about emotions is that they just seem to shoot out of anywhere, don't they? I have some people who talk to me, they say, no, I was going real fine, I was driving down the road, all of a sudden, bam! There they were. I remember one time by Fox Valley Shopping Center in Naperville, right on Highway 59. I came to a stoplight. I was in my car, the air conditioning was running, it was hot as blazes out there. And all of a sudden, I had this emotion just come washing over me. This was 4 years afterwards. Well, what it did for me is, the old statement, deja vu. I remember that hot day after my wife left me and sitting at the same stoplight in the same place with the same glare in my eyes, the same air conditioning running that wasn't quite cooling off the car, and I just had like this wave. Emotions are waves. They just come over us. Yet in the grief from the divorce, there seems to be one emotion that seems to be paramount. Last time we were here, we talked about different types of emotion. The one that seems to be the biggest is anger. You don't have any anger, right? Nah. None of you struggle with anger. I look at some people out there going, nah. I'm going to have to go on while we're in lecture now. I have a time of questions. And the first thing that comes up when people say, anger, and especially as Christians, we try to say, well, it's not healthy. It's not godly to be angry. Well, if it's not godly to be angry, then something has occurred in the Godhead. I mention that because God gets angry. Jesus Christ was angry. Well, then we say, well, they had righteous anger. Righteous anger. Well, what is righteous anger? I often like to say righteous anger is being angry at the right time and in the proper perspective. Now, some people will say to me, well, righteous anger is to be angry about things that God is angry about, which means God is angry at the right time and to the right amount. We see this, it talks about this in the book of Colossians, about an anger that is appropriate for the situation. So let me ask you a question. Is in divorce, I love these people mouthing out these questions, I'm going, I have no idea. Write it up and hold it up. No. Is that the amount of emotion that is present, especially anger, is huge. Why? Because, remember, anger helps us to stand up after we've been knocked down, helps us to build our integrity, not tear down the integrity of others or ourselves. That means we know, because when we are going through this huge grief process, there's a process of standing up. For some of us, maybe standing up for the first time in years. Maybe for the first time in our lives. So what happened? Well, the same thing that we saw happen during the 60s. What I mean by that is that during the 60s, what occurred in a lot of different areas, especially through the feminist movement and through the racial inequality, is there was a freedom that began. And it seemed to go way out, didn't it, for some? Well, when it's been packed in, pushed down, stuffed down, stomped upon, yeah, it's going to come out. It's going to come out strong. Now, is that the opposite? No. But the process of coming out is a process of discovery. Anger is like a fire. And especially after a huge loss experience, you're going to have a lot of anger. You know why? Because where there's smoke, there's fire. And where there's anger, there's hurt. Just want you to hear that one. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's anger, there's hurt. I said that anger burns, but what it does, anger generally smolders. The fire is the hurt. And you will all, I said, where there's smoke, there's fire, and where there's anger, there's hurt. And you will always share the anger when you don't feel safe to share the hurt. That's why when I see people who are really angry at God, well, it's hard to be, it was hard for me to be straightforward with God, because I was hurt so bad and I felt, God, let me down. God, I've pastored in all these states. States of confusion, states of Minneapolis, Minnesota, whatever. I'm in confusion tonight. I've pastored in these different places, and I dedicated myself to your service, and why did this happen? Well, it happened because someone fell out of love. It happened because someone didn't want to work on the relationship. It happened because, and I'm owning this one, because I put some things on the back burner that should have been right out in front. That's why it happened. Now that doesn't take away the anger so much. People will say to me, why did it happen? I'll tell them, I say, it doesn't make any difference. They'll go, well, no, because it really hurts right now. Especially if there's children involved, there's a longing too. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's anger, there's hurt. And again, you will always share the anger when you don't feel safe to share the hurt. That's why for some of you, when you first come in here, you might be sitting in your small group and you'll be really angry, or sitting here during the lecture and all of a sudden tears start to run down your face. One of the things you might end up saying is, I'm not going to listen to Richard. No way. What does he have to say that I haven't heard? But probably nothing. The one thing I do is I contain emotions. I've been where you're at right now. And I sometimes still struggle. I think we all struggle with fire. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's anger, there's hurt. Okay, let's say we built a big fire in this room. Well, that's the hurt. Got some smoke going around the room, right? I take a big bucket of water, throw it on the fire. Do I have more smoke or less? You can say, well, you can respond. I'm just kidding. More smoke. Oh, I see everybody. Does everybody hear that? No. More smoke. I want to mention that because when you share the hurt, there will probably be more anger. Why? Anger helps us to stand up after we've been knocked down. Helps us to build our integrity, know what's in our yard, know what is our responsibility, know what is other people's responsibility. Anger is not a tool by which we play the blame game. What I mean by the blame game is it's his fault, shit, her fault, yeah, it's all this. Anger starts looking at what I've done, what they've done, and helps you to begin to start working in those yards. You've heard me say before, if you don't want to heal, work on their parts. If you want to heal, work on your own. You can get bitter, or you can get better. And bitterness, by the way, is anger that is pushed down, compressed, compacted, and then just left there to rot. I hate to be so descriptive, but that's kind of the way it is. Will there be bitterness after a divorce? Unfortunately, yes. It doesn't have to stay. It doesn't have to stay there. I say, why is there going to be? Because of hopes and dreams lost and broken. Some other things will lead to often a deeper anger, a deeper working through of grief, is the fact of if it was sudden, if it came from left field, it will often deepen the grief and the anger. Now, if it came from right field, that's okay. No, if it came from any field, and it just came out of nowhere, unexpectedness. If it just came in, boom, that'll really knock it down. And if, I hate to put it this way, and it's the best word I'm going to use right now, is if the action that took place was, it's going to be a strong word, but violent. I'm not talking necessarily physically violent, but that there was an extreme cutting away that was harsh it can also lead to a deeper grief and a deeper anger. So what needs to take place? We have to get to the hurt. You can deal with the anger all you want, but all you're doing up here, if you're dealing with the smoke and the anger, if you're just dealing with that, you're up there just trying to clear out the smoke out of the room, and the fire is just putting more in. Now, you need to deal with the anger. You need to deal with the anger through prayer, through active participation, jogging, walking. I have a dog soon now, so you don't beat your dog. Not tearing down yourself, that isn't a good way. We'll do it though, right? Unfortunately, yes. Activity. When I talk about action, go for a walk with someone and talk about it. Come here. Come start building safe places. I like to say safe places to fail in. Because everyone needs a safe place to fail in. A safe place to be themselves. Now, you might be saying, well, I had those out there and it was taken away from me. Well, there's a lot of people that were safe and now it doesn't feel very safe. Well, unfortunately, after the loss of the love, we have a tendency to shrink our relationships and our acquaintances. Right now is the time to begin making connections. Now, one of the difficulties is we have a deep need, don't we? We have a deep hurt. We don't want to start Earl Shiving again, right? Don't want to cover up the rust and the pain by another love relationship. Think about that. That's a weird illustration, isn't it? But we have a tendency to do that. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's anger, there's hurt. And if expressed in the best way possible, this anger will help you to heal. It'll help you to heal because it'll build your integrity. It'll help you to discover who you are. I've had some people say to me, I wasn't doing very well in my recovery from what takes place here, or what took place, and finally I just got frustrated enough sitting home or just sitting there hurting all the time. I finally got frustrated enough that I said, heck with it. Well, frustration is a form of anger. Did you know that? Frustration is a type of anger that deals with expectations that aren't met. For some people, that was the thing that got them up there off their blessed assurance and started the recovery process. Here in this particular group, and I believe also through the heart of God, is what God says to us. And what we say to you, we don't advocate divorce. We don't advocate remarriage. But what we advocate is healing from what's taken place. You can heal. You will heal. I like to say here we have a 100% success rate. Did you know that? Everyone who wants to heal will. And everyone who doesn't want to, they get dragged along a little bit. A lot of it depends upon yourself. Now, it has to come in its time. I realize that. You can't bake a cake in 5 minutes, can you? You can try to eat it. But you eat it with a spoon. And in our lives, we need to work through, we need to address this hurt. Sometimes that means through pastoral counseling or therapeutic counseling, through group therapy, through the support group, through just taking the time that's needed and needed for you. You're worth that time. Whether you like it or not, you're worth it. And God will walk with you every day, every hour, every minute. Now see, that's where another love comes in though. Because in all this, there's a lot of what I call God issues that come around. Those of you who attend a church on a regular basis or were attending a church when you went through a divorce or through a separation, you probably heard this statement out of Malachi: God hates divorce Have you heard that? Yeah. God hates divorce. I want to say to you right now, God does not hate divorced people. Because if God did, he'd have to hate himself. In Jeremiah 3:8, the scripture says that God divorced Israel. I mentioned that because it's often hard at this point in our lives, when going through things we are, does God understand? Yes, God has gone through it. It says in Jeremiah 3:8, it says, whoops, wrong chapter. Oh, there it is, 3:8. I gave faithless Israel her certificate of divorce and sent her away because of her adulteries. God understands that pain. I'll be very honest with you. I believe God doesn't like it either. But not for the same reasons you do. You don't. God understands the complexity of relationships that occurs. God understands the spiritual wounds that result from this. And not just the spiritual wounds in you, and not just the spiritual wounds in your children, but in the people around you. Because I'll tell you what, unfortunately, no matter how much we want to think it, we are in community, and what we go through affects others. What you go through affects others. What people around you go through, it affects you. Many of my pastor friends, when I went through my divorce, they said they were really forced to finally to look at their marriage relationship. And I, of course, told God we could have done that a different way, of course. But they had a hard time, my friends, being there for me because it pointed out to them a lot of areas where they were falling short. Now, in quoting Jeremiah 3:8, I don't want to sit here and say, well, because God divorced Israel, that we then should go around, no problem, pursuing divorce whenever possible. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that at this point in our lives, we struggle with a God who really cares. And for some people, that is really a struggle. For me, this is where a cousin came in. This woman would come to me, and she would just sit and talk with me. If you knew this lady, she would talk to me for a long time. She'd just sit there. Whether she'd say anything or not, she'd sit there and we'd converse. And at the end of our time together, she would hand me a piece of paper with some scripture verses on it. I'm a pastor now, remember? And I'd take the piece of paper, rip it up, and throw it at her. So because if God is real, he's a jerk. I used a different word at that time. Okay? And she would just walk away. But she came back. And after a while, I would just take the piece of paper and put it in my pocket. Wouldn't read them. Didn't want to read them. Then one day I opened one up, and in there came a verse that you've probably heard me quote, Psalm 71, verses 20 and 21, New International Version. First verse jumped right out of me. Though you have made me see troubles many and bitter, you restore my life again. And after years you will again raise me up and grant me more honor than I had before. Some people say now that's taking place. I don't know if it is. All I know is that sometimes I'm really worse than I think I am. But I'm also a whole lot better than I used to be. I know there's a struggle for me. If God is real and cares, why is this taking place? Well, the only thing that I can offer straight up front is taking place because people have freedom of choice. Wasn't God big enough that he can rectify that? Yeah, but God won't violate a freedom of choice. I mention that because there's a lot of things that I do that I shouldn't do. Yet God is always there. Now, you might not feel that, but I'll tell you one thing. Some people say this is a trick, but I'm going to be honest with you. you can't comprehend or even imagine or believe that God's will right now, but you believe that I believe that, then we'll rest upon that for a little while until you can believe it. Let someone else be Jesus with skin to you. Let them love you as God would love you. Some of you might say, well, I had one of them and they left me. Yeah. And even if I'm attempting to be Jesus with skin to you, I will let you down. But my goal is not to use you or abuse you. I think the goal of any of us here is just to love each other. And to be, if anything, the hand, the arm, the face of Christ. Right now is going to be a difficult time in a spiritual relationship. Because I talked about those waves of grief, those waves of anger, those waves of emotion. Well, I'd just like to be really splashed a little bit right now by God, instead of just having this pain, this hurt, this longing. So first and foremost, I encourage you to be honest with God. I had a friend one day during the winter. She was mad at God. So she went out in the backyard, made snowballs, and started throwing them at God. I'm not kidding. She was out there just whipping them like crazy. Her neighbors came out. So what are you doing? She says, I'm throwing snowballs at God. So 3 of her neighbors started throwing snowballs. There's times when I felt like throwing snowballs at God. There's times when I probably threw bigger things than that. But let's put it this way. If you were angry at me, or if I was angry with you, and neither one of us says anything about it, it will just cause us to drift further and further apart. Scary. We would be able to tell each other. We need to be able to tell God. A lot of times I feel like that if I tell God, God says, yeah, I knew that, but I was just waiting. And then to see the acceptance. Another thing that I want to state in this is that you'll find maybe that things you did before don't quite make it now in your spiritual life. For about the first couple of years, it was good. And it touched me when I attended services. And then I came to a point where it was the furthest thing from my heart and my mind. Some of you might be reversed. And I don't want to get in trouble with those who might be listening to this tape in the future. And maybe some pastoral friends, but that's okay. What I mean by that is that's okay if that happens. Don't give up. But sometimes we need a vacation. Sometimes we need to just retreat. I remember as about 7-8 months after my divorce, I helped put together a singles retreat up at Conference Point Camp in Geneva, Wisconsin. And I got up like the good spiritual person I was supposed to be in the morning, sunrise, went down to what they call Plymouth Rock down there, and I sat out on this rock on the lake with water all the way around me. I watched the Unitarians watch the sunrise as they had their hands out here and they were chanting. And I was trying to be real spiritual, read my Bible, and all of a sudden I slammed it shut and I said, God, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. This is stupid. I don't want to be here. But I felt like, but I was one of the organizers. I don't want to be here. And I really felt like God spoke to me. He says, well, this is a retreat. Why don't you retreat? So what I did, I went to breakfast. I didn't have to speak until that evening, so I went down to the lake, put my feet in the water, my bottom on the sand, my back against a tree, and I didn't move till 6 o'clock. I just watched the water. I love that. I just watched the water. I had my Bible there. I had a piece of paper. notebook. I wrote some angry things, wrote some happy things, wrote some very strange things. Spoke at 6 o'clock, went right back down there, stayed down there until midnight. Wasn't even around other people. Next morning, I skipped Sunday morning service. I sat down there by that lake. And I'll tell you what, I came back knowing that God was still with me. I needed to do what I needed to do to find who I was and find who God was at that point. We need to retreat. We're in a battle. You're in a battle, you know that? Sometimes the worst enemy is who? You. I know I'm my worst enemy. I look in the mirror and I go, you're the one. Seems that way, doesn't it? And yes, there are pastors, there are Christians. Well, let's put it this way. I found out a long time ago that God doesn't hurt people. Religious people hurt people. And what I say by religious is basically religion is any set of rules you hold to. In its bluntest fact. And yes, people do hurt people. We shoot our own wounded. What? You can be an elephant? I'm trying to be an elephant. You heard me say before that what we're called to be is elephants. Just stand there. When an elephant goes down, all the other elephants just stand around until it either gets up or it dies. Well, I'm not just going to stand here and watch you die. But we can just try being. And one time I sat with a friend who was going through a divorce. And one time when a friend came and sat with me. I probably shared the story with you, but he drove from Iowa to here. And I was scared because I thought he was going to drop all these scripture verses on. He's a very good pastoral friend. And he said to me, I just want to come to cry with you. Gosh, there was a lot of healing there. Now, when I say there was a lot of healing there, I really didn't feel it for about 6 months. But it started then. Just someone driving 250 miles to be with me for less than a day to cry. I don't know about you, but that's love. We're going to address a lot of issues. That's what I like to say, issues. God issues, anger issues, abuse issues, whether they're of self or otherwise inflicted. But I'm going to tell you, we can heal. There is a healing that takes place. It can and it will come, and I'll tell you lastly, probably not the way you think it should be, or the way you think it should happen. Might not happen that way, with a neat little bow. But I'm going to be honest with you, is I never imagined my life would be what it is now. What I imagined was something that I thought was greater, but really, when I look at it now, it doesn't compare. Now, I also feel like at times I'm working my bottom off. And part of recovery is you got to work your bottom off. What I mean by that is your job is only trying. Your job isn't the result. That's God's job. Your job isn't even motivation. That's God's job. Your value isn't your job. That's God's job. All you're supposed to do is to try, and secondly, find a healthy way to try. What I mean by that is I can try to get on the other side of this board and keep ramming my head into it over and over and over again, and eventually maybe I'll get through it, right? Will I have my intellectual faculties intact? Well, I don't know. I don't know. How could I have them then? Because if I'm going to be smacking my head off, how many of you feel like you've been smacking your head against the wall? Sometimes finding a healthy way to try is going up to someone, you know how to get on the other side of the board? And you say, just walk around the edge. Why didn't I think of that? Well, maybe because you